Good morning, guys. Welcome to Liverpool FC Journal. I'm Owen James. This is your Liverpool news update for 13th of December. So Liverpool are through to the fourth round of the FA Cup after look, the scoreline may say 4-1, but it was an unconvincing performance against 17th place League One Barnsley. There were times we actually made Barnsley look like quite a good side. Look, all credit to Barnsley. They came, they fought hard, they battled, they made it difficult for Liverpool for long periods of that game. But got to say, the performance again was just awful. Genuinely poor for Liverpool. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the fact that David Ornstein this morning is rumouring no new signings for Liverpool in this window. Have Arne Slot, Richard Hughes just given up on this season? Has Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards given up on Arne Slot? Is that kind of why we're not making any new signings to cover for the injuries to Isak, Leone and Bradley? Who knows? Who knows? But let's start with last night's game. Look, you got to say, I think half-time, 2-1, two wonder strikes, put Liverpool ahead. And then there was a Dom Szoboszlai moment of absolute madness that leads to their goal. And all credit to Barnsley. They could have been 1-0 up after 40-odd seconds. It was a game where Liverpool just made such hard work. And we saw slot ball there again for all to see. Boring, slow, laborious and build-up football that just allowed Barnsley to drop back into low block, that allowed Barnsley to sit back in and cause as much defensive issues as possible. The fact that obviously I think, had that team been weaker, then you may have been saying, well, that's going to happen, isn't it? Young lads finding their way, inexperienced players finding their way. But the fact that he went quite strong with some very, talented first teamers in that squad, it is quite shocking that we struggled for so long to put Barnsley away. And the fact that he then had to bring on Ekitike and Gravenberch and Wirtz to actually finish the game off really does show how much Liverpool was struggling to do that. Now, if you go back to, the way that other teams this weekend have put away teams, Manchester City, for example, putting away an Exeter team who are ahead of Barnsley in League One, 10-1, pretty much dispatching them with zero hassle whatsoever. Yet Liverpool really struggled. And look, don't let the Slotites tell you that was a fantastic 4-1 victory, because it certainly wasn't. It was a exceptionally dull, boring game. I must admit, watching that game in the first half, I was actually struggling to stay awake. It was that boring. The football is just so bad under this manager. It is so dire and boring, and it needs to change. Something has got to give with this manager. Look, yes, we are 10 unbeaten now. Yes, obviously, the fact that we haven't lost any games is fantastic. Of course it is, and I'm not saying it isn't, but it's just the way they've gone about it has been so boring. It really is. The football is just, honestly, it is just some football from the dark ages. It's so poor. It's so slow. It shows no tactical awareness. It shows no awareness of patterns of play, no awareness of how to break down a low block. If you want to break a low block down, you've got to move the ball fast. You've got to move the ball quickly. You've got to create overloads in certain areas. You've got to use width. Now, obviously, using width is an issue for Liverpool with no out-and-out wingers. Yan Diamonde would be an answer to that, but it looks like that won't happen in this window. I do worry for the rest of the season. I genuinely do. I don't think Liverpool will win a trophy this season, if I'm being honest. If you push me now, if you said to me, put some money on it, go out there, here's 20 quid, go and put money on what Liverpool win this season, I'd say, well, we're going to finish the season trophyless. I don't think we're not going to win the league. Hopefully Manchester City will win the league. We're not going to win the FA Cup realistically. I think that'll be one of Arsenal, Manchester City, for instance, again. We're not going to win the Champions League, I don't believe. I don't think we're strong enough to go all the way in the Champions League, and that's it. That's the season done. Now, if you consider we've spent nearly £500 million, is it acceptable to come out of a season without a trophy? No, of course it isn't. And you can talk all the bullshit you want about transition season. It was never meant to be a transition season. So all of those Liverpool fans out there that are saying it's a transition season, it isn't a fucking transition season. Guys, get your heads out your asses. Seriously, man. Go back to look at the comments at the start of the season from the manager, from the sporting director, who both said this was about building a team to dominate on all four fronts. So let's not have rubbish about transition seasons, because it's just not transition seasons. And let's not use the Diogo Jota thing as an excuse. I'm sorry, but it shouldn't be. These are games that Liverpool should be acing and winning easily. And do you honestly think that if we had Jurgen Klopp as the manager, they'd be playing this dull, boring football? Of course they wouldn't. Of course they wouldn't. Now, obviously, yesterday, Xavi Alonso was sacked as Real Madrid manager, very harshly, in my opinion, after they lost the Super Cup game to Barcelona. Now, I think that is very harsh, to be honest with you. I do think, it is genuinely unfair that he was sacked. I think, Real Madrid are a very difficult club to manage, a club full of players who have absolute massive attitude problems. And I'm more interested in being Real Madrid players than actually being Real Madrid players, if you get what I'm coming from. They're more interested in the image rather than the actual hard work. I personally, I would take Alonso as manager. I think, he's worked with Frimpong and Viet previously. I think he'd get the best out of them. I think he would change the formation, which obviously would require some purchasing of players, particularly at centre-back position, which doesn't appear to be happening at the moment. And I have got my own theory on that one. I think he would play a better brand of football as well. I think he understands the club to a greater degree than Arne Slot as well. Now, people can talk about this rubbish of, Slot schooled him twice, because of the fact that obviously Liverpool have beaten Bayer Leverkusen and beaten Real Madrid. Well, by that very argument then, that if we're going for managers that have schooled other managers and beaten other managers, well then Keith Andrews has schooled Arne Slot, so therefore should we hire Keith Andrews as manager? Nuno Espirito Santo has done well against Keith Andrews, so therefore should we hire him as manager? It's a stupid argument. It's a ridiculous argument. So let's not go down that route. Slot is, for me, a dull, boring manager playing a dull, boring brand of football. I think Xavi Alonso would certainly change that. So for me, the fact that Alonso is now available, as if I was Michael Edwards, Richard Hughes, I'd be having conversations with this man today to see, when can we get him in and how can we change this. Now, I don't think it will be till the summer, if I'm being honest with you, if any change does come. I think the indication this morning, and this is from David Ornstein, so this is not from an unreliable source, this is from a very reliable source in David Ornstein. Breaking: Liverpool do not intend to sign cover for Leone or Isak in the current window, and that is likely to be the case for Connor Bradley as well, per David Ornstein. So this is, like I said, this is not coming from Team Talk or Indicalia. This is coming from a very, very reliable source in David Ornstein, a guy very much in the know. Now, to me, this is a mistake. The fact that we are now going to rely on Joe Gomez as centre-back cover. Joe was dreadful last night. He really was awful last night. Ibu, look, if it comes out that Ibu is leaving at the end of the season, expect him to down tools even more as the season goes on. Virgil van Dijk is not getting any younger. And heaven forbid we have an injury to Virgil. Now, then again, you're then down to looking at Wataru Endo or Ryan Gravenberch or Andy Robertson playing centre-back. Now, would you really want that for any length of time in this season? Now, Slot can sit in press conferences and say that they can cover there and they can play there, but it's a load of crap. We know that, and Slot is just full of shit when it comes to this. Isak, obviously, yes, I get, look, I kind of get that we shouldn't sign a centre forward, and I get that. We've got Ekitike, we've got Isak, we've got Gakpo can play there. Hopefully at some point Jadon Danns returns as well. But we should be looking at a wide forward, at least some sort of winger who can perhaps play as a winger and can play as a centre forward if required, a Yan Diamonde, for example. But it seems that is not the case either. Now, this does beg big questions for me. I honestly think that this is all part of a sign, that Slot will not be here next season. The fact that they are not investing further money in this team in January and, deferring that investment to the summer, to me seems like, well, look, why invest in a manager who's not going to be here in 6 months' time? Wait, get the new manager in, then invest in players that are going to suit what the new manager wants to do. And if that's Xabi Alonso, it's going to be a change of system, for example, which ironically would suit Viets and Frimpong, two of our newer signings, very, very well indeed. Also, the fact that Arne Slot's sort of contract talks have stalled. They're finished. He has 12 months at the end of this year. He has 12 months left on his deal. Now, if no new deal is forthcoming, a manager with 12 months left on his contract has very little power. Most players will turn around and go, well, you ain't going to be here next season, so what's the point? There's definitely that kind of attitude a lot of time from players. So I do think there's a lot of with this news as well, that it appears Liverpool will not move in this window to strengthen in any way, shape or form. it is kind of we've given up on this season, we've given up on this manager. It's about getting through this season now, bedding in these new players, and then bringing in a new manager in the summer, Xavi Alonso, for example, or someone else, and going again next season. To me, it kind of is hinting at that. I mean, I might be wrong. I could be very, very wrong, but to me, it's a huge error not to bring in a new centre-back in this window or a new winger in this window. I think if we come out of this window having signed no one, it is pretty much an admission that we've given up on the season. Honestly have just given up on this manager and this season. Guys, I'd love to know your thoughts on this news this morning. Thank you for watching LFC Journal. It's been a pleasure speaking to you as always. If you enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe and help us to continue to get growing here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.